The following program is paid for and sponsored by Life Extension Foundation.
Thank you for joining us. In our series on current issues and viewpoints, our guest today is Marc Goldman, a prominent community member and independent businessman. After selling his third-generation family dairy business, he became more active in a variety of initiatives in culture, business, real estate, and public policy. He's also been associated with several movies and Broadway shows and serves on the AISH International Advisory Board and a variety of other organizations. Marc Goldman will join us following these messages.
When I was young, it seemed that life was so wonderful, a miracle. Oh, it was beautiful, magical.
And then they showed me a world where I could be so dependable. Oh, intellectual, cynical.
Find magic again. Sprout by HP. With Intel RealSense technology inside, now you can bend the rules of creativity outside.
Life Extension Foundation was established in 1977 and has grown to become the world's largest consumer-based anti-aging organization. Life-saving achievements taken for granted today were pioneered by Life Extension Foundation decades ago. Life Extension is currently funding $10 million a year in research on significantly extending a healthy human lifespan. Diseases that once plagued humanity have largely been eradicated by scientific innovation. 3 leading causes of death in 1900 compared with how people die today. Smallpox killed millions before it was eliminated in 1979. Life Extension funds research to fight biological aging so that it also will become a relic of the past. Log on to lifeextensionfoundation.org.
With us now is Marc Goldman. Good to have you back on the show.
Pleasure. Thank you, Richard. Thanks for inviting me.
We were talking earlier about the Jewish community matters and the interesting times we are experiencing in history.
Yes.
And how it is that, unfortunately, the Jewish community is so fragmented with so many different organizations and interests. And when I first came to this country, I had hoped that there'd be far greater unity, with the main causes being far more prominent in people's minds. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, historically, unfortunately, that has been the case, where there's been a tremendous amount of disunity. On the one hand, you have to respect it because people are free to speak their mind and have such a diversity of opinion. And that's healthy to be able to at least discuss, as long as people are willing to discuss it. On the other hand, it makes it nearly impossible to get any consistency of messaging out on behalf of what the Jewish community stands for, or what Judaism stands for, or any of the things that Israel is dealing with some consistency of messaging. The Jewish community has a particular responsibility that even in the Torah it's spoken of and written about, to be the light unto the nations. And we do need to have more unity in order to be more effective in doing that. My personal explanation, if you will, of that and description of that really gets back to what was the first contribution of Judaism. And if we go back a bit and think about what we learned in high school or whatever, one of the things we learned about great ancient civilizations, we learned about Greece and Rome. And when we learned about Greece and Rome, what we also learned was that they had many gods in Greece and Rome. And if you think about it for a moment, when you have many gods, you can always pick one to agree with whatever it is that you want to do. Therefore, there is no authority. And with the Jews, and so had we been born during that period of time, we would have thought nothing of going to the Colosseum with the kids, watching lions eat people or gladiators kill each other, and that was considered entertainment, and that was fine. And that was the highest level of civilization that existed really until that time. And into that world, the Jews come carrying the message that, no, that's not how it is. There are not many gods. There's one God, and there is right and wrong. So murder is out. You can't do that. Stealing is out. And other basic things. And all of those things truly are the underlying basis of what we call today Western civilization. That we behave in a particular way to each other, and we follow some basic rules that enable civilization to function. And that's what Judaism brought to the world, and that's a big part of the message that means being a light unto the nations.
Tikkun olam.
Fixing the world, but you have to show the way, and following some of those basic principles, it begins with that. What we've come to is a very inconsistent and fragmented message from all these different Jewish organizations who purport to represent Israel or be supportive of Israel and of Judaism and of all these things. But when we have that level of inconsistency and differentiation of messaging, then to the average person, it doesn't penetrate because there's too many different messages being given. And as anyone who does marketing knows, repetition of a message is required in order to be effective in communication, because most people are not paying that much attention. So you need to explain it a number of times. And I would say that the Israelis and the Republicans have not been very effective, along with these various organizations, in following that basic marketing principle, whereas the Democrats and the Palestinians have been very effective in doing it. And I'll explain if you'd like to hear. Because when you look at Republicans, for example, you see a very broad diversity of opinion. In the Senate alone, we have Republican senators from Ted Cruz to Rand Paul. That's clearly a broad spectrum of ideological differences. Amongst Israelis, everybody in Israel thinks they're a better prime minister than the prime minister, so you have lots and lots of opinions, different opinions. But that creates no messaging because everybody's giving their opinion. I think that when you look at it, Republicans feel much more free to express themselves in how they view it, as opposed to following the party line. But I'd compare the Republicans and Israelis in this way. Whatever the problem is, both Republicans and Israelis would like to fix the problem. And if you ask a question of either of them, the odds of getting a reasonably truthful answer are high. But this difference in mindset and everyone's individual opinion means we have no messaging. When you look at the other side of society, and you look at the Democrats and you look at the Palestinians, I would say you have a completely different perspective, because number one, they don't want to fix the problem because all of their power comes from making sure that the problem persists.
Lies by omission, telling half-truths, emphasizing one thing and ignoring others. Supposedly holding Israel to a higher standard, some people say, but that's a compliment I think Israel could do without. Why do you feel that media in general seems to subject Israel to lies by omission?
Well, I think one thing, and you have to give the public relations people on the Arab side credit for doing this. From the beginning of the foundation, of the forming of the modern state of Israel until at least 1967, the world recognized with no uncertainty that there's tiny Israel surrounded by hundreds of millions of aggressive, hostile neighbors. And so Israel, when it was viewed as the underdog, was seen as the underdog, which it was, and it still is. After 60, and so any map that was ever shown at that time of that area of the world, you would see the picture with Israel as big as a dot, and all of these surrounding Arab countries with tens of millions of people in them surrounding it, so you could see how tiny Israel was. In the last 20 years at least, possibly longer, almost every time when we see a map of the Middle East, it's great big Israel against this little Palestinian area. And it leaves out all the hostile neighbors that are outside. So Israel is mistakenly and inaccurately being shown as the larger when it still represents the size of New Jersey in an area as big as the whole United States. And they're saying Israel is the big one there. And it's just inaccurate geographically, population-wise, or any other facts. And yet people see the map of Israel against a Palestinian part of Gaza or some other part there of Israel, and it gives them an inaccurate view of what's going on, and they don't know the area enough to know the difference.
I'd like us to discuss why, but first we have to pause for these commercial messages. We'll be right back. We're back with Marc Goldman. Marc, we were talking about all of these topics of lies by omission and how the media tends to single Israel out for criticism and so forth while ignoring worse situations that occur all over the world. And it's actually reprehensible. But why is this? Is this a new kind of anti-Semitism in your opinion? A new anti-Zionism as they call it?
Personally, I don't think it's new. I think it's the same as it's been since the beginning. And I think it relates to what I said earlier about what the message of Judaism is and the idea of being a light unto the nations. Because what that means is we as individuals, Jewish or not, have to control our lowest impulses and behave in a reasonable way. And none of us are thrilled to be told all the time what to do. Sometimes we just want to eat what we want, whether it's good for us or not, even if we know better, and engage in certain behaviors that we know may not be the best behaviors. So the idea of having to follow certain rules and not go on your lowest impulses, which is the message, is resented, I would say, by many people. And if you look in history, many of the ones who came out against Jews spoke about that. Hitler is quoted as saying that the Jews are the ones who brought morality and conscience to the world, and that's not the right way, and let's destroy morality and conscience, and that was his main goal in trying to eliminate Jews. So that is what we represent, and so Israel represents that, consciously or subconsciously, in the minds of many of the people that you're talking about. And so there's a certain amount of resentment that people have in doing that. And I think, in my opinion, that's a significant part of why this anti-Israel hostility is there.
How would you explain the paradox, the fact that Israel and Jewish people have disproportionately contributed so enormously to humanity, whether it is in medicine, agriculture, drip irrigation, technology, computers, software? Why are all of those facts largely ignored?
Well, it's the same thing. People don't like being told what to do, and so acknowledging that this is where so many good things and so many things that have furthered and benefited the world in general, as you say, because the agricultural things, among other things, have enabled more people to be fed. Far fewer people are dying from starvation than was the case before some of these wonderful inventions of Israeli agriculture. But I mean, typically you see the left finding any reason to demonize people and undo it. Because if you look at the left philosophically, they're saying, and we have so much of this, there is no God. I mean, the Democratic platform 4 years ago, they wanted to remove all references to God from the platform, as well as removing Jerusalem as being the capital of Israel as part of the Democrat platform. So they're of the opinion that government knows best. They want to go back to the Roman way. I can pick whatever God I want to agree with whatever it is that I think is the right thing to do. And now we're going by my opinion. We're not going by what the fundamental rules are of what a civilized society can be. And when you go down that route, you better then, if I'm in charge, you better hope I'm a nice guy. But we can't count on that, and that's why we have these rules, and that's why we have things, and that's why the whole idea of one God was the single most transformational message ever brought to humanity, and it truly transformed it. Because imagine what the world would look like if that had not happened. We would all just be killing each other at rates beyond understanding, and that was the case when Rome and Greece were in charge, if you will. Virtually every dictatorship begins by saying that there's no God and people aren't allowed to believe in that. So the Nazis did that, the communists did that, the Russian communists and the Chinese communists, and every place where you see that. And when they do that and there's no God, they can kill as many as they want because there's no consequence, there's no continued thing, there's no further consequence beyond doing what you want. The government knows, and that's it. And we've seen the results of that time after time, and millions. You know, it's an interesting thing, in my opinion, because so many people say, oh, more people have died because of religion than of not. But the fact is, more people have died because of no religion. Because when you can say there's no God, how many people died at the hands of the Nazis, not just Jews? How many people died? Stalin murdered them by the tens of millions to suit his desires, because, and if there's no God, he can get away with that. Mao did the same. The communists have continued to do the same. So that's what we're dealing with. And what we have with the Muslims is they've turned it all on its head, so they say they can murder in the name of God, but clearly they've distorted what it says in order to justify and rationalize their bad actions.
It's really mystifying, because in peace they could really make the Middle East flourish in peace with mutual cooperation, and in the absolute chaos that exists today following the supposed Arab Spring and the fragmentation of countries nowadays. So much more could be achieved in peace. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are that it's unrealistic to even talk about peace until the incitement stops and the desire for eradication. I mean, what we see in the case of Israel in particular is that the Arabs in general, their basic intention is no Israel. Their intention is not to work things out. It's not about land. I think that's clear and obvious. The amount of land available to the Arabs in all that surrounding area is so enormous that there's more than enough room for people. So it's not that, but I mean, I hate to make this as an analogy, but it's like two kids playing. The other one didn't want the toy until the other one had it. And that's really what we're looking at, because nobody was pushing to control that area at all. When Egypt was there and they had Gaza, there were no Palestinians saying, oh, this is ours, we want our own state. When Jordan controlled Jerusalem and the West Bank, you didn't see any groups of Arabs or Muslims saying that they wanted to be free from Jordanian control or that this was their place of worship. They put they strew garbage all over the place. It meant nothing to them.
And no Arab head of state ever visited Jerusalem
Right.
when it was under their control.
Exactly.
And neither is Jerusalem mentioned once in the Quran, but over 700 times in the Bible that Jews and Christians hold dear.
Right. So it's a made-up story, and it's about no Israel. It's not about trying to work anything out. So they don't view it that way, and the incitement that's continued to be told but to them, and they're taught from birth to be hostile and that Jews are bad and took their land and all this stuff. You almost can't blame them on the one hand because they're taught these lies from birth. They don't know any differently. On the other hand, you can't be nice to them because they'll kill you in a second, as they've shown us over and over again. So we have to be strong, and we have to recognize that there are bad people, there are evil people, there are people who want to do us harm. We would like to think everyone thinks like us, and there's ways to work it out. But it's a very dangerous thought to have, because we can't fathom the thinking of somebody who would just as soon kill you as look at you, or says that you have no right to exist because you don't believe in what they believe in. If you go around in Israel, what you'll find is, you'll find mosques, you'll find Orthodox, Reform, and conservative synagogues of all kinds and all variations there. You'll find the Baha'is, you'll find Christians and Catholics, and you name it, Buddhists, everyone, and everyone is tolerated and everyone is protected. If you go to the Muslim countries, you won't find a synagogue, you won't find a church, you won't find a Buddhist temple. Nothing is allowed but their way, and therefore when you're dealing with no tolerance, there's nothing to work out. You can't deal with it. So to begin with, we have to get to the first stage, which is that you are entitled to live as I am also, and let's find the way to do that. But if I'm not tolerant of that you have any right to live, there's nothing to work out then.
And churches that precede Islam by 700 years are desecrated in Egypt. Followers of other faiths are murdered in India, the Arab world, and elsewhere. Their temples desecrated. Yeah. It's really a tragedy, historic sites as well. On a more positive note, before we conclude, share with our audience a little bit about your background.
I'm just a retired milkman from New Jersey. I had a company there that we did processing and packaging and distribution of all kinds of fluid refrigerated products, milk and juice and so on. I did that for quite a long time. I had a lot of very interesting experiences there, and came to understand how too big government is so dangerous to people. If you'd like me, I'll share one story with you.
Sure.
That I think might be interesting. My place, and my grandparents started with a small dairy farm in Fair Lawn, New Jersey. That's how the company began. So, but the cows were gone by the time I was born, and we were pasteurizing and delivering. But the state of New York had a licensing law in place for over 60 years, where they had this county-by-county licensing system. And if you weren't one of the boys, the New York State Department of Agriculture was not going to give you a license. And as a result of this essential lack of competition in the New York market for milk, the people in New York were paying $2.50 for a gallon of milk at the time, when New Jersey consumers were paying $2. So there was a significant price to pay. And for the most part, it was Democrat-run New York. And I remember specifically Governor Cuomo talking so eloquently, so often about how concerned he was about poor people and hardworking people and those who were struggling to get by. And he could make you, he was so emotional about it. It was a wonderful speaker. And yet, I, among others, was in the press on a regular basis, making him aware that all those poor people he was so concerned about were paying 20% and 30% more for a basic commodity. And all he had to do was give tell the Commissioner of Agriculture to give licenses. There was nothing preventing him from doing that. But he didn't do it. And in the end, I had to win a case in federal court, a constitutional case, to uphold the Constitution, the Commerce Clause of the Constitution, and the judge said that they can't keep me out. The price of milk came down dramatically. The consumers in New York saved hundreds of millions of dollars a year as a result of competition now entering the market. And when I went through that experience, which took me about 7 years from beginning to end with all of the different things I had to deal with, I realized that government intervention into the marketplace in ways like this is part of what keeps people dying of starvation, because they're preventing access to goods that could otherwise get there. Yes, health codes are important, making sure it's safe and sanitary and so on is appropriate, but just stopping for economic things like that is harmful to the general populace. And it was just one of the experiences. And another lesson that I learned from it is I would ask myself this question: why is it that a milkman from New Jersey has to be the one to uphold the Constitution against a state that's perfectly willing to violate it? And I realized that it's incumbent on all of us and each of us to stand up for that. Otherwise, we have what we almost have now, which is a government out of control that wants to control virtually every aspect of our life. And who would have thought that the price you pay for a gallon of milk is something that the government is going to have such a significant impact on? And there's thousands and thousands of those things going on, that of the things we buy and the things we do, that we don't even know how impactful it is with the overregulation and all of the other things. So I think that those were at least some of the lessons that I learned from that experience.
It's fascinating that humanity has intelligent solutions for so many things technologically and so forth. Mm-hmm. Electric cars and other advances in health. Really interesting. It's a sad situation if intelligent alternatives are not properly implemented, and I would hope we see more of that. These are really exciting times, and it's been a real pleasure having you on the show. We have to do this yet again in the future.
I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure to be on your show, and thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you. I'll be right back. This concludes our special program for today on current issues and viewpoints. I'm Richard Peritz. Thank you for being with us.